my topic today is developmental dysplasia of the hip. Regarding the term developmental dysplasia, previously it was called as congenital dislocation of the hip joint. Later it was found that it is not always congenital, as some of the hips which are normal at birth later develop dysplasia and dislocations. Later came the developmental displacement of the hip, and the term developmental displacement was changed to developmental dysplasia of the hip. This was done by Klisic in 1989. Klisic was from Yugoslavia. You all know what a dislocation means. It is the complete displacement of the articular surface that comprise a joint. There is no contact between the original articular surfaces. While a subluxation means there is partial loss of contact between the articular surfaces, and there will be a widened teardrop femoral head distance and reduced central head angle. There will be a break in the Shenden's line. And third is a dysplasia. So that means a deficient development of the acetabulum, increased obliquity. As you see here, the acetabular angle is increased here. There is loss of concavity of the acetabulum, but there is an intact Shenden's line. So the spectrum of DDH can be a frank dislocation or a subluxation or a dysplasia of the hip. So there is a wide spectrum ranging from dysplasia to dislocation. Now, what is meant by teratologic dislocation? It is the dislocation before birth that is not reducible after birth. It is an irreducible, very high dislocation, and otolony test will be negative, indicating that the hip is irreducible. And usually, after some time, if you see the X-ray, the false acetabulum is seen very early in these cases, showing that it has been remaining out and pressing against the ilium for a long time. So it is a stiff hip that is dislocated at birth. It is usually associated with neuromuscular problems and associated with arthrogryposis, caudal regression syndrome, sacral agenesis, dystrophic dorsal, so many conditions, syndromic as well as neurological conditions and muscular problems can lead to a teratologic dislocation. Congenital dislocation of the knee and a rigid equinovarus or vertical talus are frequently associated with this. How common is the problem? The usual incidence that is reported in the literature is 1 to 2 per 1,000 live births. But it may be, some reports say that it is high as 30 to 50 per 1,000 in subluxatable hips. This is because the way of screening varies. Some are clinical screening, some are universal ultrasound screening, and some are ultrasound screening of high-risk infants. Therefore, depending upon what type of screening method you are using, the incidence also varies. But the incidence is very high in Caucasians and in Native Americans, while it is low in Chinese and it is almost nil in Native Africans. So what about the problem in India? It has been reported between 1 to 9.5 per 1,000 in various studies. In Delhi, there was a study by Anil Methani, and he found that 18.7% of abnormal hip in 1,000 live births. There was another study from Vellore where they found that the abnormal hip was 7.5%. It was basically an ultrasound evaluation, and the incidence of DDH is 1 in 1,000. So the conclusion is the DDH is not uncommon in India. It is probably as equally seen in India as in the West. Now, what about the pathomechanics? DDH causes progressive anatomical changes in the acetabulum and the femoral head. Many of these changes are reversible if the treatment is started early. Most of these changes occur on the acetabular side. And changes in the femur is due to the constant pressure of the femoral head against the acetabulum and due to increased anteversion. So at birth, the unstable hips are having an elastic and lax capsule and an elongated ligamentum teres. Usually the acetabular changes are mild. So a ridge of thickened cartilage is formed that is called as the neolimbus as the femoral head slides in and out of the acetabulum. So this is what is called as the neolimbus. So a thickened articular cartilage, fibrocartilaginous area that is seen at the edge of the acetabulum as the femoral head moves in and out of the acetabulum. Secondary changes occur due to soft tissue, in the soft tissues and in the acetabulum. The ligamentum teres thickens and elongate. The inferior capsule and the transverse acetabular ligament will contract. Iliopsoas tendon is stretched over the anteromedial capsule, forming an hourglass constriction. Later, the labrum becomes inverted. Neolimbus thickens and the acetabulum is filled with pulvinar. So in a late dislocation, these are the three things that are found in the inside the acetabulum. The neolimbus, that is the fibrocartilaginous tissue in the edge, thickens. The labrum, which is almost horizontal almost horizontally normal, first everts and then inverts. And the whole acetabular cavity is filled with pulvinar. This is the normal labrum. As you see here, when the head is trying to go out or subluxate, what is happening is this labrum gets everted. It moves upwards. Once the head moves over that, and what happens is it inverts into the acetabulum. So first it everts and then it inverts. So because of the pressure, first it everts, and then once the dislocation is established, it inverts. The acetabular roof becomes more oblique, the medial acetabular wall thicken, and the femoral head becomes globular and more anteverted. Eventually, these changes will progress to a point where any reduction, even if surgical, is ill-advised. This is because of the grossly contracted acetabulum as well as the deformed femoral head. So these diagram, all the students should remember in the exam. What are the structures that obstruct the reduction in DDH? That is the tight psoas, the tight adductors, the tight hamstrings, and the tight rectus femoris. These are the pelvifemoral muscles. When the head moves upwards, all the pelvifemoral muscles will contract. What are the intrinsic factors that prevent reduction? It is capsule, that is elongated, redundant capsule. Then you have got the hourglass constriction produced as a result of the tight psoas muscle. Then the labrum, I have already said, the inverted labrum. The ligamentum teres thickens. The transverse acetabular ligament contract, and the pulvinar, that is the fibrofatty tissue within the acetabulum, also prevents reduction. These are the 6 intrinsic factors that prevent reduction in the case of a DDH. How will you clinically evaluate these children? So the birth order, in the history you have to ask for the birth order. More than 50% of the cases are firstborn children. The female preponderance is there. The left side is more commonly affected than the right. Bilateral cases are found in 35% of cases. They may be associated with oligohydramnios and the breech presentation. The breech is seen in 16% of the cases, and first term hypothyroidism has been reported in some series. Looking at the risk factors again, these are the risk factors that are mentioned in the literature: firstborn, female, full term, family history of DDH, breech, Caucasian, left hip, and the history of saddling. But AAOS found that the significant out of these are the breech presentation, the family history of DDH, history of clinical instability, and swaddling. These are the 4 things that are very important, and all these should undergo an ultrasound evaluation. What about the family history? The siblings of the index cases 10 times more risk than normal individuals. Twin studies show that monozygotic, it is 34% concordance. Concordance means the presence of the same trait in both members of a pair of twins. So in a monozygotic twins, it has got 34% concordance, while in dizygotic, it has got 3% concordance. According to what is inherited, according to Wine Davis, it is the joint laxity and acetabular dysplasia. These are the two things that are inherited. Regarding breech presentation, there are various types of breech presentation, which of them will give an increased incidence of DDH. So in a double breech like this, they have got a low incidence. Single footling breech, 2%, while an extended breech is associated with 20% chance or increased risk of DDH. So it is the extended breech that increases the incidence of DDH. So this is how the babies uh, are being carried in our place, either with cloth or by the new nappies. And this is what is called as the swaddling. In swaddling, what happens, the hip is adducted, internally rotated and extended. And this is a bad position for the baby's hip. So this is the way the babies are carried in Africa. And in India, they are carried on their lap with the hip abducted and flexed. They are good positions. But nowadays, you can see this type of swaddling when the mothers take the children into the shopping complex and all. And this again increases the chance. So nursing habit is an important factor which increases the incidence of DDH. Now we need to do a head to foot examination. The plagiocephaly is one. Plagiocephaly means flattening on one side of the skull. Metatarsus adductus is associated with DDH 1.5 to 10%. Torticollis 15 to 20%. Talipes calcaneovalgus. These are the three main things: metatarsus adductus, torticollis, and talipes calcaneovalgus. Whenever you see any of these children, you always look at the hip for evidence of DDH. Look for ligamentous laxity, spina bifida, arthrogryposis. There is very little association with DDH and clubfoot. Ligamentous laxity, there is maternal relaxin probably causes a higher incidence of DDH in female children. The effect of relaxing is much stronger in female children than male children. So heritable ligamentous laxity have been described by Wine-Davis, and connective tissue abnormality, especially in type 3 and type 1 collagen, have been described. Ligamentous laxity, you should know one of these criteria, either the Wine-Davis criteria, where 3 or the 5 pair of joints examined in one individual shows degree of ligamentous laxity. It is considered positive. That is, the first one is the thumb, flexion of the thumb to touch the forearm, extension of the finger so that it is parallel to the forearm, hyperextension of the elbow more than 15, hyperextension of the knee more than 15 degrees, and dorsiflexion beyond 60 degrees. So that is the Wine-Davis criteria. And there is another one, popular one, that is called as the Beaton score. The first is almost the same. The second is hyperextension of the fingers, hyperextension of the elbow, hyperextension of the knee. The only difference is it is flexion of the spine, the bending forward so that the arm, so that the hand can touch the floor. So here the total score is 6, 9, and more than 5 indicate ligamentous laxity. Now coming to DDH screening. This is an important topic. Can be asked in the exam. It can be clinical screening or ultrasound screening. Ultrasound screening can be universal screening or high-risk screening. So clinical screening, the two main tests that are used are the Barlow's test and the Ortolani test. The Barlow test is a provocative test for dislocation. A baby relaxed on a firm surface. You should be very gentle in the examination. You flex the hip, you adduct and give gentle pressure. You can give an exit of adduct and gentle pressure on the medial side. The hip goes out. So it is a contained hip which goes out of the acetabulum, indicating that the hip is subluxatable. While Ortolani test, you relax baby, again, firm surface, gentle examination, flex the hip to 90 degree. You keep your fingers over the trochanter and you lift and abduct. You can feel the click of entry. So this is a dislocated hip, dislocated but reducible hip. So the Ortolani test is for a dislocated hip, and Barlow's test is for a dislocatable hip. When you do these tests, you find that the hip is in-joined and stable. That means it is a normal hip. So it can be dislocatable, that is a Barlow positive, dislocated but reducible, Ortolani positive, and the last scenario is dislocated and irreducible in a no bone. It indicates that it is probably a case of teratologic dislocation. Another term which you should know is what is neonatal hip instability. That is a positive Barlow or an Ortolani test, clinically stable, but ultrasound is abnormal. So we'll come to the ultrasound evaluation in the subsequent slides. The fate of this unstable hip, that is the neonatal hip instability, still remains an enigma. Often, an unstable hip spontaneously stabilizes in more than 80% of the cases, while rarely it becomes dislocated, subluxated, or go into dysplasia. So rarely it can go into the spectrum of DDH, or it can reduce itself and become a normal hip. So in an infant, now we will come to the infant, that about the neonates. In the infant, you look for asymmetric skin folds, decreased abduction, Galeazzi sign, and the Klizik sign. These are the four things which you look for. The limited abduction is a reliable method. It has got a sensitivity of 69 and specificity of 54. So it is you always look for limited abduction on the affected hip. In bilateral cases also, there may be bilateral decrease in the abduction. Asymmetric skin folds, you keep the limbs in the same position and look for skin folds. The crease extend posteriorly, you are more suspicious. And again, you look at the gluteal folds also. There will be asymmetry of the gluteal folds. Then Galeazzi or the Alice sign, you keep the knees flexed and together, heels at the same level, symmetric adduction and abduction, and look at the height of the knees. You find that there will be shortening in the affected side. The Klizik test is nothing but something like a shoemaker's line. You keep the middle finger on the infant's greater trochanter and the index finger over the ASIS, and an imaginary line is drawn from the middle finger through the index finger to the point of the umbilicus. So usually it is across above the umbilicus. In a dislocated hip, it line crosses below the umbilicus. So it is nothing but you call it as a digital shoemaker's line. So this is usefulness is mainly in the bilateral hips. In bilateral hips, this may be useful as both these lines will be below the level of the umbilicus. Now coming to the walking age, there will be delay in walking. There will be hyperlordosis as you see in this child. Equinus gait because of the shortening. Trendelenburg gait may be seen. The Galeazzi sign will be positive. Shortening, positive Trendelenburg test, and exaggerated rotation. See this child walking. Shortening as well as a positive Trendelenburg can be appreciated in his gait. Okay. In bilateral dislocation, there may be waddling gait, hyperlordosis, Trendelenburg test will be positive, wide perineum, and exaggerated rotation. See, this is the waddling gait, typical waddling gait. You can see the child walking. It's a case of arthrogryposis with bilateral hip problems.